Hello, guys. Welcome back to the second episode already, coming thick and fast for 2022. The calendar is in full swing, I think it's fair to say now. 2 races down, we're starting to get a proper idea as to who is where in the pecking order. And a nice little 2-week break now for Australia. Of course, the updated Albert Park is to
The
come.
new Australia.
Yeah, the new Australia. First changes to that track since it's come onto the F1 calendar. So
Yeah, it will be, because before that it would have been Adelaide.
Adelaide, yeah. And
which I actually quite liked as a track.
Yeah, I still rate it in the V8 supercars. Like always gives some exciting street racing in V8s. Yeah, street track's always good for a bit of door banging, trying to squeeze through a one-car gap. But yeah, Saudi Arabia, of course, we only just had it not long ago in 2021. It literally seems like just the other day we were already here, and we are back doing it all over again. Well, I mean, there was more issues for some of the teams up and down the grid in practice. Haas having more issues with their car, AlphaTauri having more engine problems, and that was kind of a pattern for AlphaTauri actually the entire weekend. Haas seemed to get on top of their problem quite quickly and rectified it. Of course, there's other things for Haas that we have to discuss. But yeah, practice didn't really show much difference, but I think we're in that phase, kind of like the Formula One of old, where we're not going to see any major upgrades on the cars until we come back to the European season. I think that's when we're going to see the major turning points. I don't know why I'm turning the steering wheel; it's habit. But yeah, anything you saw that sort of stood? Oh no! Oh, casualty!
Quick, fix your camera!
Oh God, no! Quick, get my
for our Spotify and podcast listeners, Pro's camera just decided to disappear off somewhere.
I know why. It's the Velcro strap down here that's attached to my sock.
A Velcro strap attached to his sock. Of course it is, chat. You know, what else would it be?
That natural attack there, lying in wait. Yeah, almost died. Natural. Literally almost died.
God, the drama. The drama's starting early.
Yeah, this is drama gate.
So yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think we'll see some incremental upgrades as we always do.
Yeah.
Generally, sort of every other race there'll be something. I'd sneakily and secretly hoped there would be some upgrades coming this time, because we did see cars trying different things during testing. So I thought they might have reverted to a previous working solution or not, but clearly not for most of the cars up the grid. I think you're right. Europe's where we'll start seeing some of the major design changes and revisions, and I think we're generally both in agreement for the cars that are woefully off the pace, because they are big teams on the whole that can afford to do so. That's going to be a Spec B revision. It's going to be almost an entirely new car from the ground up, because whatever is wrong is fundamentally baked into the car. And obviously I shared with you my theory the other day, which I'm sure we'll come to at some point.
Yeah.
Very quickly going back to practice. Obviously one fairly significant and major event almost completely overshadowed practice, which was the missile strike.
Yes.
On I forget which oil depot it was. It was a famous brand like Petronas or someone.
It was one of the Aramco, wasn't it?
Aramco.
The actual sponsor of F1, Aramco. Yeah, it was almost done. It just seemed too accurate. F1's in town. Let's blow up an oil field of the sponsors.
We know that Saudi Arabia has had a lot of political and civil unrest over the years. This was obviously very clearly done to send a message during the time frame when the paddock was here. I think what's more telling is the division in the paddock around it.
Oh yeah.
So the team principals all came out saying they were unified in their agreement. And then shortly after, the drivers came out and universally said, we will not race here.
Yeah.
And then they were called back in by Stefano Domenicali. And the understanding that I have had from the sort of the word on the grapevine is that they were told, you will race or you won't race again, or you won't leave Saudi Arabia, or words to that effect. Yeah. And an hour and a half later, this is at 1:30 in the morning as well. This is not a normal meeting. Suddenly, all of the drivers changed their tune. I doubt they gave a very compelling argument for their safety. I think that was probably very much a case of you will do it because the paddock says you will, or you will never drive a Formula One car again. And my real concern here is that safety took a backseat. Political arguments were forgotten about. You know, what happened to Rebasers One and everything else that Formula One stands for. It all took a backseat for nothing other than money.
Yep.
We know Saudi Arabia as a Grand Prix brings in a lot of money.
Yes.
And that's why it's here. We both have an utter detest for the track itself. It's not a good racetrack. We saw some significant dangerous things happening this weekend because of the way that racetrack is laid out. And it's all here because of money. And I hate that. It's the same as the pay driver argument.
Oh,
there are better drivers out there not getting a drive because someone's paying for them. There are better tracks out there. Kyalami, we talked about last week as an example, that aren't getting on the calendar because there's more money to be had in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree. You know, it just reeked to me, to be honest, because you know, you're saying that we're going to race here and that, but then when there's been other sort of unrest and that, other tracks have been instantly dropped and all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of like, so it's one rule for one and one rule for another, and it just reeks of get that out of the way. It just reeks of just. Yeah, show me the money, lads, and we'll do whatever you want. You know, so you know, it unfortunately for us motorsport fans that have loved F1 for the racing since its inception, it's a different world to where it used to be in terms of just watching the racing. Now it's all very politicized, and if there's money, that's where we're going, and you don't get to say in the matter. That's it. You know, it's the same as if I was to suddenly come into, I don't know, a fortune from a Nigerian prince somewhere via one of these email scams. I could walk down to a racing team and go, so I've got 60 million that I'm willing to pay for one season in your car. Is that okay? And they'll just go, yep, sign the contract, boys. Sign the contract. Because,
and don't get me wrong, I'm a realist. Money makes the world go round, and everyone needs to make profit. You know, though when you think of those sellers that you're buying things, and you get a great deal, and you negotiate and you push them really hard, but actually, if you push them so hard, they're not making any profit, and they go out of business, you're never going to benefit from them again. So everything has to balance. There has to be an equilibrium. My fear is, I think what we're seeing is not necessarily profit; it's profiteering and greed, and it's getting worse.
It is getting worse, and you can see the change in the venues. Look at F1 calendars through the year. The years, and there's been years when there's been threats to drop iconic tracks that have a lot of history, such as Silverstone. Primarily, that was a big one for a number of years, and I saw some conversations. I can't think what website it was on. It might have been Planet F1, one of the usual bigger websites for F1 stuff. Where they're obviously now in this full swing of moving to places like Miami, and they want to bring Las Vegas onto the calendar, which again, Las Vegas is the cash cow of America, let's be honest. They want to go to all these places, but there's going to come a point where you're going to have to drop some venues to put these on the calendar. And
well, not if Stefano gets his way. What does he want? 30 races a season?
He has said he wants a 30 race calendar. Now, I don't know about you or me, but we've got families here at home, and I'm sure the mechanics have got families at home. If you're flying away week upon week upon week, and then you're only going to end up with the Christmas period, because there's not going to be time to have a summer break anymore. That's going to go. Nope. You're going to be flying around the year, and you're going to have 2 months at home, but then you're going to have to be back in the factory though, helping the boys and girls out. Because the repackaging and everything starts again, because they send the freight off months in advance to all of these tracks around the world. I think 30 races. I think you're kind of taking the piss a bit there, Stefano. I'm not sure. As much as I love F1. I'm not sure I'm on board for a 30 race calendar. I think that's kind of taken away, because I like the build up over the winter for the oncoming season. That's that's always been a thing, and we had a really short break this year. And I don't know, part of me wasn't as hyped because it felt like it was just there's a race in a couple of weeks. I used to get excited. Used to get excited for it. And we need that. We need that tension over the off season as to driver moves and who's building what car and all that kind of stuff. 30
What we
races,
do.
no.
But equally, I'm not particularly interested in seeing a Formula One car with windscreen wipers or a Formula One car with a snowplow on the front. You know, there's
Yeah,
a good
no,
reason they don't race over the winter period.
exactly, exactly. So what you gonna do? Host half the calendar in Australia? You know, that's what you're left with because you're gonna have to alter it for the seasons.
Yeah,
And then you've
exactly.
got the whole rigmarole of time zones and broadcasting, and
Yes.
you know, come on now, we've got to start being realistic. I think we're towards the high end as to where I think F1 should stay with
Mm,
races. I don't think we should be thinking. But what I don't want to see is going to new venues for the sake of going to a new venue because it's all about that, you know, the
yeah.
money. I want to go to racetracks because it's a good racetrack and going to give us good racing. That's what I want to be seeing, you know. And
Yeah.
there is plenty of good racetracks already out there,
Hmm.
but we keep on getting these Tilka street drone like fucking places, and it's not what I
It's
want.
not. No, it's not. It's not. And it's not for a number of reasons. You know, we were fortunate in the end that we never had to go through the pain that was the Hanoi street circuit of
Oh,
Vietnam, which looked like it was just going to be horrendous.
it
And
was horrendous
certainly
on the
our
game.
sim racing was horrendous there. Saudi Arabia is almost a carbon copy of that. And also, you know, things like Azerbaijan
Yeah,
is cut from the same
yeah,
cloth. And what it doesn't allow is it doesn't allow for free flowing racing. The
mm,
track is barely wide enough for two cars next to each other as well, which makes it more challenging to overtake, and therefore you're less likely
yeah.
to see it than you would at wide open circuits like, you know, Monza or Silverstone. Um, but and you know, I hate to sound like the voice of reason where safety is concerned, if you have a major off at speed, there are gravel traps and lots of things to start reducing the energy in the car before you hit anything hard. We have just seen Spa-Francorchamps go through a multi-million pound regeneration,
Yes.
particularly around Eau Rouge,
Yeah.
because of the number of accidents there. That actually had a decent amount of runoff. Now it's got significantly more and additional safety features. Paul Ricard came back onto the calendar only because it had those red, white, and blue lines, which are actually grippy lines that
Yeah.
stop you before you hit the barrier. But the barrier is still, you know, five or
Us.
six car lengths away from the car.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, it's the other side of the curb.
Yeah.
And we saw, you know, let's go straight into it,
Yeah.
Steve.
Let's go into it.
We
Yeah.
saw we saw Latifi push it too hard in qualifying. And actually, Latifi was quite lucky because it was a double impact. And when you watch the accident, he hits one barrier, bounces, and hits the other. Had he have not had the first to reduce the energy and bounce back, that would have been quite a high
Mm,
G and quite a nasty impact.
yeah.
He walked away from it, thank God, and he was
He was
fine.
fine. Yeah.
The one obviously we have to talk about is Mick.
Mick.
Now, you did that, you ran the numbers. What was the number of G's he pulled in that
So,
accident?
according to the stats, at the moment that they've released that we know of, it was at least 73G on that car.
17. Now,
So,
for reference, your average human passes out at about somewhere between 8 and 12 Gs.
fighter pilot territory, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're
Yeah.
pulling that in a jet fighter doing, you know,
Yeah.
a high G turn, you will pass out fairly quickly. So this is, you know, almost 7 times that. It was a huge impact. And you'll notice, for those of you who spotted it in qualifying, there were plenty of replays of Latifi's accident.
Mm,
There wasn't a single replay of Mick's accident for a
no.
long, long time. And that is because, as you pointed out to me, the medical car would have been alerted that the high G meter went off in the car.
Yeah.
And until they can get absolute cast iron confirmation and proof that the driver's okay,
We won't
they don't
see
show
it.
replays of that because you don't know, it could be a fatal at that
Yeah.
point. We know he was in the car and he was conscious. That was about as much as anyone told us. And then I love the fact that after he got out the car and he was in the ambulance and he was being taken away, the first person he called was his mum.
Yeah.
Because, you know, everyone watching this will have a mother and a father.
Oh,
And
God, yeah.
if you think about Mick's mum, who's had to go through all those nervous times watching his dad race, for only then to suffer a life-changing accident skiing later in life, and now is essentially his full-time carer,
Yeah.
to then see her son go and do exactly, and it's her only son because it's a son and a daughter, I think, that
Son and
Michael had, isn't
daughter.
it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is her only
yeah.
son going out and driving at 220 miles an hour around street circuits, a hair away from death at any one time. You know, I mean, God, she must be beside herself, the poor woman.
Yeah, because I mean, Gunther alluded in the paddock when he was collared, and he said he didn't find out from Mick himself. He found out from the mum.
Mm.
It was his mum that let the team know he is okay.
Yeah.
It's just a precautionary thing. But I mean, that was substantial. But because
Mm.
the angle you come through in that corner, and obviously that corner's been a bit of a bugbear anyway. Even in Formula 2, we saw accidents galore where they just
Mm.
hook on that curb. Because what Saudi done to do rectify this whole track limits rubbish as well, not just the fact you got closed walls, but the corners where you could get a track limits infringement, they made the drop off of the curb basically a cliff. So when you hook, you think you hook your wheel over that,
Mm.
it's gonna literally launch that up and spear you off. And I don't
Yeah.
think that that is the best way to go about it. Put some fucking sensors in there and line them up with the car, and then have that tell you when they've gone out of the track limits. Or better
But
yet, let's just not race here.
yeah, that one. That I'm all for that.
you
Let's
know,
not come back to this track again.
yeah.
But we had a discussion around this last week.
Mm.
In in previous years, where the car, whilst they always had mechanical grip, the vast majority of the grip and what kept these cars on the circuit was aerodynamic grip.
Yes. Yeah.
We know that this year that is significantly reduced, and they are relying almost entirely on ground effect. But ground effect is predicated on there being a low pressure between the car and the track and a very low amount of space between the two to create that low pressure. All it takes is some debris on the track, hitting a curb too hard, a pothole, a manhole cover that's knocked up, all things that we've seen many times before on a Formula
Yeah.
One circuit. That car is fully loaded going around a fast corner. Suddenly, that low pressure is not available under the car because a wheel's popped up. You don't have any grip.
Yeah.
And what happens when you don't have any grip? You understeer. And if there's a gravel trap to go into, you're going to slow the car before you have a nasty accident. You might be out of the race, but you're going to walk away from the car. In a street circuit like Saudi Arabia, where you're doing 170 miles an hour around that corner,
Yeah.
you have a one-way ticket to a barrier at high speed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because obviously, just to take it back to the gravel trap aspect, obviously we've seen Spa now bring back the gravel trap and in great abundance. So you've still got the tarmac runoffs, but now, before you are even getting anywhere close to that barrier, you've now got a sea of gravel to go back through. And I, for one, do you know what? I'm glad to see it back because there's no data that has actually shown any real sort of difference in the safety between going off on the tarmac into the wall to going through the gravel into the wall. You could argue that on occasion the gravel spit the car up, but it took a lot of the force out of the car.
Mm.
I'm glad that we've got it back, and in key areas as well, at the top of Eau Rouge and out of the exit of La Source. And to be honest, do you know what it also helps with? It stops them pushing the fucking track limits.
Yes,
yeah,
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 you respect the track limits
yeah,
much more that way.
yeah,
But I think the gravel trap, it does sort of depend on how you hit it. So I
yes,
remember either late 80s or early 90s, Senna had an accident. I think it was at Estoril, where he hit the gravel trap sideways, a full lateral slide into the
yeah,
gravel trap, and the car dug its wheels in
yeah,
and then flipped over onto its
yeah,
roof. But equally, we've seen cars go straight at them and actually launch off the curb and then skip over the
yeah,
gravel.
yeah,
So yeah, it does its job. And had the
yeah,
gravel not have been there, had it have been grass or whatever, that accident would have happened exactly the same way. The
yeah.
gravel was there as an aid for
Of
it. But
course.
again, if you've got a gravel trap which is 30 meters long, you've still got 30 meters opportunity to reduce the energy in the
Yeah.
car, even if it's continuing to travel at speed. In fact, I'll give you a really good example. Felipe Massa. Now let's cast our minds back, and I forget the year. I'm going to say
2009.
08, 09. You know what I'm talking about.
Hungary.
Hungary
Yeah.
gets hit in the helmet by a suspension spring off the back of Barrichello's brawn,
That's it.
is knocked unconscious, and his car was slowed significantly by a gravel trap before it parked itself in the barrier.
Yeah.
Had that gravel trap had not have been there, had it have just been tarmac runoff, he would have continued to accelerate into it and would have been even hurt even worse than he already was. So they play a very useful role.
They do. They do. And I maintain that they still have a place on a racetrack. I was kind of. To be honest, I've not been a fan of tarmac runoff since the day they brought them in. When they started,
No.
you know, churning up all these old circuits and chucking a bit of asphalt down. It just, you know, because
The one at Paul Ricard might have some merit.
yeah, that might. But I mean, we've got to remember though that Paul Ricard was largely a test facility before it became, well, before it went back to being a major player in the motorsports world.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know
We used to go to Magny Cours, didn't we?
We did, yes, we did, and we had some other obscure tracks in France that we did go to. Reims was one, and God Almighty, there was some other ones as well. But you know, and obviously, you know, those strips, like you say, are made of this grippy sort of compound, and we have found that obviously when F1 cars have dared venture out there, drivers have come back on and it's absolutely destroyed their tyres, and all they've done is run wide across it. But because of the sort of gritty nature of it on these soft Pirellis, you just get rid of them, they're gone, you know.
Yeah. Some sort of a hybrid between Velcro and sandpaper.
Yeah. But hey, you know, I guess we're in that situation. We are seeing tracks sort of move back towards the gravel traps around the world. They are sort of moving, you know, sort of doing a hybrid of both.
Tracks that can accommodate it. Because obviously we have so many street circuits now that just can't.
Yeah, like the likes of Singapore and that, they never will. Baku never will. You know, all of those, no, not going to happen, you know. So it'll be interesting to see who does readopt them. You know, let's see what happens. Obviously, thank God Mick is okay.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I for one am not a fan of coming back here to Saudi, despite obviously the race and no matter how good it was. You know, and that's largely down to a couple of people, but you know.
There was a huge accident here last year as well. And, you know, I know it was Peter Mazepin that had bore the brunt of it. And this might be the only time you'll ever hear me on this podcast defending Mazepin. If you watch it from his on board, he is just completely unsighted by the madness that is occurring in front of him. And then suddenly a car moves. And it's sort of, it's reminiscent of the Days of Thunder accident. A car moves and suddenly there's a stationary one. And where did you go?
Yeah, and no matter how quick your reflexes are, you ain't getting out of that one. You know, it doesn't matter.
And wasn't Saudi Arabia where there was a nasty accident in F2? A car didn't get off the grid and someone went into the back of a stationary car.
That was Fittipaldi, wasn't it? That was Fittipaldi. Because he actually... Is that the one where he got his leg injured?
I think it is. And don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily blame the track for that. You could argue in a wider track with greater visibility, the cars would have split earlier and you might have seen it. But it was a standing start incident. It's perhaps coincidental. But yeah, there was a number of bad accidents here last year, only to repeat them again this year.
Yeah. And then
Professor Sid Watkins would be turning in his grave, frankly.
Oh, he would be, frankly, yeah. And do you know what? I'll be there with him because that's just not cuddling a dead corpse. That'd be a bit weird, but but you know, on the principle of the matter, yeah.
I sort of saw where you were going with that. I think.
Yeah, just nestled in there with him. But yeah, we've said all along, like even the drivers themselves have said, it's a dangerous track. You come around so many of the corners blindsided that you don't stand a chance. And you know, unfortunately, the gods that be have decided that nope, we're going racing around this, and that's tough, you know, because the money is there. So
money talks.
Yeah, money does talk. Money talks. Anyway, moving on to qualifying. Some standout performers. Obviously, a man after 216 Grand Prix, 11 years of F1 racing, finally got his first pole position. That man is Sergio Perez. Did you see the lap?
No.
You didn't see the lap?
I didn't.
Oh, John. Do you know
so,
what?
yeah. Unfortunately, obviously, for the reference for everyone watching, this was a really challenging weekend to do any F1. A, because it was the first sunny weekend in the UK we've had since last year, so the chores, mow the lawn, wash the car, get all that sort of stuff done. But it was also Mothering Sunday, so most of my viewing of the race was done on a 6-inch phone sat at the dining table, hoping no one would ask me too many questions. While I'll do that next week.
Yeah.
Oh no, Lewis is.
Yes. So, yeah, Sergio Perez. To be honest, it's a lap I didn't expect him to put in. I
No.
did not see it coming because Charles had gone out there and absolutely blitzed it, purpled all the way around. And Perez was only a personal best through sector 1, but then suddenly explodes into a purple sector 2, and we were kind of like, "Hello, what the hell?" And
So I saw Skypad put the side by side up, and the side by side was interesting because actually it shows Charles being ahead through sector 1, ahead
yes,
through sector 2,
yep,
and it's a blistering sector 3 that
yeah,
pulls Checo back in front.
yeah, and that kind of carried over into the race, the
Mm.
difference between the cars, because that made for quite an interesting showdown in the race.
Mm.
But yeah, he did. He really pulled it out the bag towards the end of the lap. The car for him just got quicker as the lap went on. I don't know what it is about the Red Bull setup. I know they trialed some new rear wings on the car this weekend, and they seem to do a reasonably better. But yeah, really pulled out the bag, and he didn't take it by much. But at the end of the day, you don't need much in qualifying as long as you're ahead of that guy. That's it.
So the gap I was just looking at, actually, the gap is 0.025 of a second between them.
Exactly. So
There's nothing.
nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Literally
Isn't 0.04 a blink of an eye?
Yes, I think
I
it's
think it
something
is.
in that region.
So it's it's less than a blink of an eye. But I'm really happy for Checo. Checo is one of those drivers that I think the neutrals all really like Checo. It's difficult to dislike him.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased for him getting this opportunity because he got an opportunity to go to a race-winning team early in his career when he moved from Sauber to McLaren, and he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready, and he ended up going back to what would have been Racing Point or probably Force India at the time, and rebuilt his reputation and rebuilt his name. And now he's been given a second opportunity at the Red Bull, and I'm made up for him. And he's done a great job in comparison to how Albon and Gasly and Kvyat drove that second car, and even to some degree Danny Rick. He's been a great number 2, and that sort of sounds negative, but I'm thinking it as a positive. He's been, there's no one can drive that car like Max. It's obviously, we said before, we think it's designed on a knife edge to suit Max's driving style, and Checo's had to adapt to it, and he's done a remarkable job.
It's a remarkable job. I think this year's car's a bit better for Perez. It's still not quite there for him, but it's a more even spread, I would say. But yeah,
Well,
he's doing a good job. He's where you want your number 2 to be. He's battling for those third or fourth. That's and when you're against basically, I'm going to say one other team at the front of the field. That's where you want your number 2 to sort of always be sticking his nose in for that final step on the podium. You kind of want that.
Well, spoiler alert. If it wasn't for an issue completely out of his control, I think Checo probably would have won that race.
Yeah, I reckon he would have. Yeah, once that situation unveiled itself, it changed the dynamic of that race substantially for a number of drivers up and down that grid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's a couple of calls actually I'm going to say as well in the race that I want to come to eventually that left me a little bit puzzled as to race director calls. Possibly the first time I've doubted the race director, the replacement. But it's to do with safety car procedures and stuff.
Second race. First time I've doubted him. Second race he's ever done.
Second race, Yeah. But yeah. Qualifying was good. Magnussen, despite the issues through practice, gets it into Q3 again. Valtteri Bottas continues his streak of Q3 appearances. That man is consistent. I've got to give it to him. He's loving life.
I think we'll see a very new Valtteri this year without the weight, the pressure of expectation on his shoulder. I think he'll drive with much more freedom than he ever has.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm made up for the guy because he deserves it now to be in that sort of leadership role. and he's blossoming. I have to say, I feel like he's really taken a hold of that kind of role within that team, and Joe has been very buoyant about how much help Bottas gives him. If he's got questions, Valtteri's more than happy to answer them and guide him on things, and he's becoming a fatherly figure. And who would have thought that? Who would have thought that after his naked cartwheeling in the Finnish ice over the winter?
Well, we all do things we're not proud of, Steve.
Well, yeah, actually that's true.
But come on, we're skirting around the issue here. Let's talk about Lewis.
Oh well, I was going to say talk about the race. What am I talking about? Yeah, Lewis obviously beforehand. Yeah. Horrendous qualifying performance. Now, Autosport did an article on this. Obviously, he's been out in Q1 before, but due to technical issues. The last time he was out in a qualifying session in Q1 on legitimate pace was all the way back in 2009 in the McLaren that was a dog of a car.
Yep. A long time.
That's
a long time.
13 years ago.
Mm.
So, God, by then he'd only started in F1 in 2007, so that was only his third season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was all at sea. He was all at sea. My worry here is that Lewis is recognizing that this is not a car, at least in its current guise, this is not a car that he's going to be able to challenge for a championship for, and he's somehow mentally checked out. The other side of that coin is the car could just be no good, but there was a significant time difference between him and George.
Yeah, George had a handle on it.
He did, and that could be setup issues. It could be setup issues.
It could be, and I know that one of the Mercedes guys, I think it was his engineer, bizarrely come out and said, "Oh yeah, we tried an extravagant setup change for qualifying from practice."
You don't do that.
You don't do that in a qualifying session. I know you're desperate to find those tenths of a second and to make up the difference, but I think Mercedes have just inherently got the design wrong this year, and it's going to take time to fix it. So rather than trying extravagant things with the car you've got, focus on bringing in a Spec B car to mitigate those issues, to bring yourself back in that way, and just make do with what you've got for now. Try and pick up as many points as you can in the meantime, because the car is quite capable of 5th and 6th place. We've seen that now.
We have.
And, that's 10 and 8 points respectively for each of those positions. So if you bring both cars home, 5th and 6th, that's 18 points a race. I would rather take 18 points a race than no points a race.
100%.
Just saying. Because, and we know it's capable of that because George has done it now for both races in a row.
And for anyone out there listening who's wondering, why don't you go for a big change between practice and qualifying? Formula One has long since had what they call parc ferme rules. At the whatever setup is on your car when you leave the garage for your first qualifying lap, that is the setup that must be on your car throughout all of qualifying and the race. The only thing you may change is the front wing angle within a couple of clicks either way for various reasons, but you can't change the ride height, the stiffness, the camber, the toe. All that is set firm.
Yes.
And the golden rule is you don't make a big change from practice to qualifying unless you're absolutely dead certain it's going to work, and even then it's a risk. Because you could end up with a dog of a car. Maybe that's what happened to Lewis. But maybe. Shall I share my theory then?
Okay, go on then. Go with your theory.
You like my theory, I know you do.
Go on.
So the cars at the back of the grid are all Mercedes powered. So if we look at qualifying, it was Latifi, Hulkenberg, Albon, Hamilton, Stroll, all Mercedes powered cars. The McLarens had a slightly better showing, but they were still almost best of the rest. Alphas and Haas were thereabouts, one of each behind, the rest in front. There is fundamentally something wrong with the Mercedes powertrain, because that is the only similarity between all of those cars. Now, Toto has been adamant there is not a power deficit. I'm still not 100% convinced because I watched Lewis and Magnussen. So I think it was 48 and 49.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone gets the opportunity to look at this as a replay on the F1 YouTube channel, go and have a look at it. Magnussen with DRS along the two straights comes up behind Lewis and overtakes him. He makes it look easy. It's like taking candy from a baby. By the time they get to the braking point, he's a full car's length in front of Lewis, and he turns in and away he goes. Next lap, Lewis has been close enough to do exactly the same back to him. But he just doesn't have the power of that Ferrari engine. He can't get there. And when he does eventually overtake, he's only about 3/4 of a car in front when he overtakes and turns in. There is clearly a difference there. Now, if Soto's adamant this is not a power deficit, who am I to disagree with him? So here's my theory. The porpoising that we've been seeing, we talked about last week, where cars bottom out and bounce back up again because of the way ground effect works, seems to be worse in Mercedes cars. Now, that's going to affect grip. It's going to affect straight line speed because you're constantly going up and down. My hunch is that the center of mass or the center of gravity in that Mercedes powertrain, including the gearbox, is higher than the Honda or the Ferrari powered cars or the Renault powered cars for that matter, which means the teams are struggling to get the car low enough to the ground to make enough use out of the ground effect. And therefore, when the porpoising happens, the weight is higher up and it takes longer for it to settle again, which is causing more instability. It's the only thing that I can think of that would be a causal effect across every Mercedes powertrain car if it's not just sheer power and grunt from the engine. So that's my punt. Let's see if I turn out to be right later in the season.
Well, I think it's a plausible one because on that theory of yours, I went back and did some research on F1 engines, and this is going to take us a little bit back towards the early 2000s and the 90s. For me, that's my golden era of F1 because that's what I grew up with and tuned in. Now, it's interesting. So, like the heights and everything of the engines and how the balance of the engine actually is and how much it affects the cars. Now, one of the worst engines that was, at the time, it was touted to be this incredible, amazing, engine that was going to come into Formula One. There's two that stand out. You had the VW W16, which was a really weird contraption because they basically just bolted two V8 engines together. Yeah. And then you had the Subaru engine, which Coloni used for, I think, all of 5 races after.
Which is a
Boxer engine. Yes, Boxer engine. And the reason why both of those failed, now I know that they ended up actually being down on horsepower, but the main issue that the teams had with them was how the engine was balanced in the back of the car. So much so that the Coloni Subaru engine, when it was mounted into the back of the car, now this is a fundamental design problem that Subaru had done. It had to be put on top of a bracket inside of the car to get it to balance, which obviously when you lift something up, it moves the center of gravity, and how it then moves through a corner, there's more angle for it to tilt. It's at a higher angle. And the W16 was much the same. Where the actual center mass of that engine was, it created all kinds of handling. That's why the drivers would come back into the pits and they just were like, the car is just, it's either snapping or understeering, or and the car just feels completely unbalanced. And into the early 2000s, interestingly, Ford started to suffer with this issue with the old Cosworth engines, because the Cosworth engine fundamentally hadn't been changed in design since its actual inception, going way back to the 50s, 60s. When they
old DFE.
Yeah, exactly. Fundamentally, that engine had just evolved slightly through the eras to compensate. But obviously, if you're only slightly evolving the same design, you're never really getting rid of any inherent problems that were originally there, because you're using the core basis of that engine. And that is what, we used to then see the lesser teams, and I know they couldn't invest as much into aero and stuff, but it was also part of the problem why their cars handled so badly, is the balance of the engine and everything in the rear also wasn't there as well. whereas you had Ferrari basically bringing new engines, new designs all the time. Mercedes then were matching that, and then we had the likes of BMW come fresh into F1 with their one as well, and Ford were just left behind. I don't know. It seems to have been an issue for the engines that have struggled over the times. The actual, like you say, the issue that you've raised, that has been a fundamental part of it and why they've suffered.
Yeah.
It
Because
fits.
chassis design and aero is a huge part of
It
Formula
is.
One. So the engine has to work with that. We saw this when Honda came back into F1 with McLaren. We were having similar issues. I find it fascinating, by the way, that they're the two engines you pick, because they're also engines that had various other issues as well. So Steve's already described it, but we understand a V8. The pistons are in a V shape, so your W16 is a V8 with a V8 next to it, joined in a W shape. Now, you can buy W engine cars. Volkswagen released the Passat. The B5 Passat came with a W8, so two V4s next to each other. And what I remember about that car from the ones that I drove, they weren't necessarily as powerful as a 4-litre V8 you'd expect from another manufacturer, but they were very torquey. There was a lot of torque. So, part of that snap as well is potentially that there's a shed load of torque going to the rear wheels. The other thing, of course, with boxers, and I'm sure this wasn't the case with the Formula One engine, but for those of you who have fond memories of listening to that rumble of Subarus, either going through a forest or going down to the local shops, because let's face it, you've heard them in both places, that particular sound from the boxer engine is because of unequal length headers. So when you have pistons going up and down, they all have exactly the same amount of travel. Something like 86.5 mil stroke, I think, is what you get for a 2-litre. But in a boxer, where they are diametrically opposed, they are slightly different lengths. And it was always the long-standing joke that piston number 3 was the one made out of chocolate in a Subaru Impreza, because it was furthest away and used to suffer from oil starvation. But again, if you had unequal length headers in an engine with a boxer layout in a Formula One car, that's going to do no end of bad news for your aerodynamics and your chassis stability. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting theory, and I think you're probably, I would say, going to be on the money with it. I think, because obviously Ferrari did bring a new design of engine. They were working on a new design, and it seems to be doing the trick. And of course, Red Bull, Honda. I know it's largely still a Honda, but Red Bull have had their input into it, and theirs is working. Mercedes isn't. I mean, just out of curiosity, for Australia, what I want them to do is put the normal side pods back on one of the cars and see what happens. Just let's see what happens. I just want to see it. I just want to see it, just for science.
I forgot to mention this. I saw a photograph of testing at Spain, where they had stripped down most of the bodywork off of the Mercedes. And when you looked carefully, those full side pods that were on there at Spain were hiding the raked side pods inside. So rather than actually being two different designs of car, they had just used an older chassis to hide their design that they'd gone with.
See, what kind of data are you going to get from that? Because you've added on those extra side pods. That is going to affect the data you're going to get.
Well, it is. What they'll have done is they'll have been focusing on data elsewhere and probably trying desperately to keep cards in their pockets to not give other teams the opportunity to come up with the same rate design before the Bahrain test.
It's bitten them in the arse, because, I mean, I'm not being funny. When you have Gunther come out, of little old Haas, and they go, oh, that was our first design, but we binned it. That should have said everything you needed to know about that.
I know.
That
wouldn't have been his design either. It would have been bloody Dalara's design.
That's the first design that that we came up with, and we decided not to go down that route.
Yeah.
Okay, so the team that finished stone cold last in the constructors has decided, no, we're not going down that route. But red flag anywhere. Hello, stop. I don't know. But let's get into the race. Let's do it. Obviously, I know qualifying, the last thing was mixed car and all that. So we've moved past that. We're now coming into the race. He didn't take part in the race. Haas, It wasn't that he couldn't take part; they declared him fit to take part. But Haas elected to withdraw the car because they said they haven't actually manufactured enough spare parts to risk having another accident. Because if they have another accident, it's then going to affect Australia, and they would rather just focus on Australia, come back fighting with Mick actually fresh and fit for it, than risk it. And
And
plus,
it makes sense.
you know,
You could see
yeah.
when they lifted that car off the track, it split in half. You know, the chassis
Yeah.
split, the gearbox and that rear axle went one way, and the rest of the chassis went the other. It was not going to be repairable in that time.
No, it's a good call. It's a good call from the team. You know, focus the efforts on one car for here. Let's maximize that car, and just do what we can going on. Of course, moving to the race, we had one car not even make it round to the grid. More engine issues for AlphaTauri. Yeah, Yuki lost all power. Worrying times for AlphaTauri. They need to get on top of those gremlins.
Well, they do, but let's also face facts here that that's 4 retirements in 2 races for a Red Bull powertrain, as they're now referred to. But yeah, the Honda engine to you and me.
Yeah.
No, that's concerning.
It is concerning. Yeah, I mean, Red Bull seems to get on top of their issue pretty sharpish. So I don't know what they changed, but whatever they changed, it worked.
I have a hunch.
I wonder.
I think Red Bull were running their cars at Bahrain a little bit lower on fuel than perhaps they let on, and I think they might have just run out of fuel.
This was the theory, wasn't it? Because the only way you get a vacuum in the fuel system is if it sucks through air, and Formula 1 tanks are made of this squishy, meshy stuff. So there's no actual air in there until you get down to literally the dregs, because it is a mesh that shrinks with the fuel going out of it at the same time. It's a very good material, like incredible material that they use, and obviously it expands when it's full.
Sorry, I'm chuckling here because the only other vehicle I ever known that's done that is the Land Rover Defender.
Well, yes, there is that as well.
Yes, sorry, I'm interrupting. Carry on.
Sorry, Honda. Land Rover. Do you mind? Yeah, that'd be a really bizarre link up. But weirder things have happened in the world of Formula 1. Never say never. But yeah, they've gone with this material. So the only way I can feasibly see that happening is, like you say, because I think we had this discussion on our WhatsApp conversation, and it was very much, there's a real possibility here that to keep up with the straight line speed of the Ferrari and everything else, they've ran short on fuel to be in the mix. Because when we saw Max actually get dropped out of the DRS range at Bahrain, he did just drop away bit by bit by bit. And the only thing that pulled him back in was the undercut. But then he was still dropped again bit by bit by bit. And it's fascinating that both of the cars towards the latter part of the race suddenly ran out of fuel. Now, I know there's all that thing about faulty fuel pumps, and that could still be the issue, but
it could. But as you said, that's a spec part.
That's a spec part, and as I said, the FIA had given all the teams permission to go and look at the part, and if they wanted to, they could change it. Now, as someone who's at the front of the grid, and I know I'm not going to get a penalty for changing to a new part that's apparently not got any faults with it, why would you not just do it? Why would you not just do it? Just do it. Just change it. Just change the part. It's free. It's a freebie. The FIA are giving you a freebie. At any other point in the season, working on that car in Parc Fermé, slam dunk, back of the grid or pit lane start. You can't do it between qualifying and race. That's it.
It's a no-lose scenario. It's a brand new part that wouldn't have had the wear and additional running from qualifying and practice. And equally, it's an opportunity to get into the engine where you might spot something you never would have done before. Oh dear, that vacuum line's got a massive hole in it. Maybe I'll replace that. Yes, you might take a penalty, but I'd rather a 5-place or a 10-place grid penalty than not being able to start the race.
Exactly.
Seems a no-brainer.
A very stupid thing. And like McLaren were the sensible ones that went, yeah, we'll just replace both. Why not?
Not that it did them any favours, but yes.
Struggling. They were already struggling, but I'm sure they'd still rather finish a race than have both cars burning at the side of a racetrack with a fuel leak or something,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so definite issues still with the Honda Red Bull. I don't know how you want to call it. I'm just going to call it a Honda still. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll flit depending on what sort of mood I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, if it's horrendously bad, it's a Red Bull. If it's going well, it's a Mazda.
Neither of us drive Hondas, by the way. We
Yeah.
do both drive the same manufacturer of Japanese car, but it ain't Honda.
Do you have a Mazda?
Yeah,
Do you?
yeah. You've
Oh.
seen my car. You have stood next to my car.
Oh, yeah, I have. Well, these things happen. But yeah, so we get to the race eventually after Yuki has been wheeled away in disappointment once more. And yeah, I kind
I
of
can
feel.
describe the race in one word.
Go on.
Dull.
Yeah, dull,
It-
and it had a little seasoning here and there of an overtake, and yeah, it
So,
for large parts nothing happened. Everyone followed each other.
yeah. A colleague of mine from work who does listen to these podcasts from time to time, so if you are listening, you'll know who you are, texted me and said, bland first 40 laps, amazing last 10.
Yeah.
That's as good a synopsis of this race as I'm going to hear. It was the usual thing. Lap 1, lap 2, bit of dicing, bit of chopping and changing of position. And then it fell into that age-old Formula 1 processional event up until Latifi binned it. As
Oh.
he's developing form for
Hey,
doing this now.
I'll tell you what, he's getting another lifetime supply of Red Bull coming his way.
Oh, well, but is he though? Because
Wow.
again, I've heard some back and forth about this, and I have a very strong opinion. So the lap before Latifi binned it into the barrier, Ferrari said to Leclerc, "We'll box." Obviously, everyone hears the radio. Checo and Red Bull heard that. They were leading. They decided they would box first. Now, it is usually standard operating procedure that you do the opposite of what the car in front does. There's no point following him into the pits because you're going to come out in the same position. At that point, you try and go longer. You go for the overcut. You hope for a safety car. And of course, it was one lap in that Latifi binned it. And as soon as I saw that front wing in the middle of the track and then it popped up with virtual safety car, I was like, well, I ain't gonna last long. Bring out the full safety car, and then of course away it came. And it's racing, and it's what happened. It's heartbreaking for Checo because it wasn't his fault.
No, it wasn't. I felt quite gutted for Checo, to be honest, because up until that point he had managed it beautifully. He was just plugging away as Checo does, Mr. Consistent, just plugging in the laps, minding his own business, and then a wild Latifi appears. It's. Did you see Latifi's crash? Did you see?
I did. Yeah.
What on? It was such a. It was. Oh, it just reeked. It was such poor car control, and you've been going around that track now for 40 odd laps, or however many laps it was, and you sort of just suddenly
14.
14 laps.
Yeah.
14 laps? Okay. Well, same thing.
He'd done what, 250 laps over the course of the weekend by this point.
Yeah.
It wasn't a new circuit to him.
It was the most bizarre overcorrection of a car I've seen in an F1 driver. I'm trying to think of the last driver I saw correct a car like that. And it would probably be, actually, did you know what? The one that stands out to me. And this is going
I hope you're going to say PM. Go on, who are you thinking?
What, Maldonado? No, the one that stood out to me was Yuichi Ide in the Super Aguri back in his first ever race when he was just overcorrecting everything and spinning and struggling, and
I'm starting to see similarities between Latifi and Maldonado. The only difference was, I think Maldonado, and this hurts me inside to say, I think Maldonado had a bit more pace than Latifi. He was reckless with it, but he could drive it. He could, handle that car a bit better.
Yes, yeah. Maldonado could, on his day, he was rapid. He was rapid, and I've got to give that to him. He was.
He's the last person to win a race for Williams. 2012 Barcelona, I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Him versus Alonso of all people. Amazing stuff. But yeah, Latifi, I'm not being funny. He's not displaying any characteristics of a driver that is now into his third season in Formula One. You know.
Ah, no. So I disagree with you there.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Okay. He's displayed his checkbook. Okay. That's yeah. We'll give him that. But on the track, I always say your third year in F1 is the definitive tipping point for your career. You get the first year is your learning phase. Second year, we want to see a marked improvement, and the third
Mm,
year is when you should be hitting your stride. Then
mm,
you've got 2 full seasons under your belt. Latifi seems to be regressing. He's going backwards now.
yeah, yeah, he is.
He's he's woefully off the pace. He's out of his
Mhm.
depth in these ground effect cars. If he wasn't already out of his depth beforehand, I always maintained he was a steady peddler, but this year he is all at sea with ground effect. He's nothing spectacular. He's not going to get you points on a race by race basis. He's going to keep the car out of the wall largely. But then this year we're seeing him in a ground effect car, all at sea, all at sea. It's as if he's just he's one of us guys just for the first time going, oh, that looks great. I'll have a go at that.
So
He
I'm just
yeah
looking back at something because I can't base his qualifying or his race lap times against anyone because he didn't
no
go the
didn't do
distance in
enough.
either
Yeah
session. But the wonderful BBC website will show me all of the practice times. In
mm,
practice one, he did 26 laps and he was the 18th quickest car. Only Mick and Kevin Magnussen were slower. Kevin Magnussen only did 2 laps and none of them actually got him a time. In
yeah
practice two, he was 18th again, another 26 laps. Alex Albon, his teammate, and Kevin Magnussen, both slower. Magnussen only did 13 laps. And in third practice, he was the slowest car by about half a second. So he's never looked like he was anywhere near
no
the pace this weekend at all.
no no. And Bahrain he was out of his depth. Yeah, he had no pace at Bahrain. He was steadily plugging round at the back, but what good is
Mm,
that? I'm sorry, but you're in your third season now. This is where, no matter how much money you've got, questions start to be asked about do we keep persisting with this guy for his checkbook, or do we have to now start focusing on getting someone in that can drive the car and get us some points and try and earn the money that way via championship
mm,
position? We know the Williams is a poor car at the moment. We know that.
mm-hmm.
We concede it's a poor car, but at least it's looked half racy in the hands of Alex Albon every now and again. He has managed to get involved in some kind of battle with someone on the track, which of course Lance Stroll will be absolutely ruining because they had a bit of a coming together in the race.
Yes, they did.
That was horrendously clumsy. I still maintain, and I know it's an unpopular decision here, but I still maintain that if had Lance actually left the car's width on the inside rather than chop across the front of the Williams, they both would have made it through there absolutely fine. And
I
Lance
agree.
would have had the inside line for turn 2. So why risk it? Why risk the
Dis-
contact?
discretion is the better part of valor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah,
But
and
that's very much what Lance is about. It's not as well thought out. He's not where he wants to be. He's not where he was when he was driving the. I'm still going to call it a Force India forever days. So
yeah,
know what I mean. But when him and Checo were driving the Force Indias together, and he was up there in the pink Mercedes.
yeah.
He wants those days back, and he's going about it in the wrong way.
Well, I think we could also say though, based on the rumours coming out of the paddock, that his dad's going about it the wrong way as well.
Jesus,
I think
yeah.
you're the one that told me about this, so you're probably best to bring that in.
Yeah, so in fairness, there's probably a couple of things we need to talk about from Twitter over the weekend, but
Mm,
one of the things coming out of Bahrain was Aston Martin engineers were talking about the Aston Martin garage being a place of fear and anxiety. And this is due to Big Daddy Stroll coming down to the garage in Bahrain and screaming, shouting, and berating the team for their performance. And everyone's heads are now down low and no one wants to stick their head up above the parapet and no one wants to challenge him because he's the money man. But, as you very rightly said, it doesn't do any good to
no,
go and shout at the team. If they're supposed to have done a 3-second pit stop and it took them 3.5 minutes, yeah, bawl them
fine,
out, shout at
fine.
them, tell them they're idiots, do what you want.
Yeah,
But actually, the person you want to be shouting at this point is the person who developed your car or your engine or your aero package or whatever it is,
Your
because
designers, yeah,
yeah, it's not
yeah.
the engineers on the ground's fault. They're doing the best that they can with the machinery they have available to them. What good does it do you to go and shout at them? It's like my house burning down and me going shouting at the ambulance service that the fire engine didn't turn up.
Yeah,
What good
exactly.
is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, exactly, exactly. No, it doesn't help anyone. You know, even from like, I mean, this is going back some years, but even when I was doing the motorsport back in my younger years, you know, if you had a team manager or a senior figure that, you know, if you've got a shit car, you've got a shit car, and no matter what words you throw out there, it's a shit car. It doesn't change that. It doesn't suddenly make the car have an extra second of performance a lap. It doesn't work like that, you know.
No,
And
that's not
I've
how physics
yeah,
works.
exactly. And I've been in garages where team principals have been like that, and you just see the heads and morale are just fucking rock bottom. And if they're rock bottom, no one is going to pull out that extra tenth of a second in a pit stop, or you know, go above and beyond to excel, because what's the fucking point? You're being moaned at
Why
or
should you?
for every little thing when you're not the guy that's fucking designed this heap of shit. You know, you're not the guy
Mm,
that sat in a design office over the last year going, oh, yeah, these new regulations, this is exactly the car we need, and it turns out to be crap.
mm,
And that should be the guy that has his head on the chopping block, not the guys
yeah.
that are, you know, like normal guys for all intents and purposes. They're like you or me. They
Mm.
do it because they love it and they love being in motorsport. But I wouldn't want to be in that team right now, especially since, and I will also say, Nico Hulkenberg beating Daddy's boy as well.
You hate to see it, don't you?
Ooh,
Oh
ooh,
no.
oh no! Was that the race classification? Nico Hulkenberg above Lance Stroll? Oh
I think he was.
my heart bleeds. My heart
Yep.
bleeds. I'm sorry. This is a
Eight,
guy
eight
that's
tenths quicker on his fastest lap as well.
it's a guy who's done nowhere near as much substantial mileage as Lance has over the last year and a
No,
half, and yet
no.
comes in and is like, yeah, I'll match him. I'll go better than him. Whatever, you know.
We've said it before and we'll say it again. He deserves a regular
He
drive. He's too
deserves.
good to be a super sub. I still maintain I don't think he's going to get one. I think that
No.
ship has sailed for him, unfortunately. And I think he'd be better off turning his attention to sports cars, Le Mans, which he's got a good
Well,
pedigree in already.
he's already
Um,
done well in sports cars beforehand. You know, I
mm,
think that option is solidly there should he want
yeah.
to delve into it. Plus, with all the new manufacturers coming in now with the new hypercar series, there's a
Mhm.
load of seats there. Go
Yeah.
for it. You know,
Mm.
I hear K Mag left a seat open in IMSA.
Oh, God, he would have done. Yeah, you would have
Yeah,
left them high and dry at the last
yeah,
minute.
he would have. But you know,
But we do need to talk about something else from Twitter over the weekend as well.
mm.
You know what I'm going to talk about? It's the Marshall incident.
Oh, and actually, I've got one more thing to talk about from Twitter over the weekend as
Oh,
well.
God,
So,
it's been busy.
yeah, the Marshall, big talking point. Oof, ooh, and
So
yeah,
this all sounded a bit he said, she said when I first saw it on Twitter, but
mm,
there was rumors flying around that a marshal had been wishing ill on drivers, particularly Lewis Hamilton for
yeah,
whatever reason, on his Twitter account and verbally to other marshals. And as you rightly pointed out, Steve, you could potentially be the person to save that driver's life.
yeah,
You could be potentially the one pulling them from a car. A Roman Grosjean incident.
yeah.
This is not some fanciful idea. It happened a year ago.
Well,
It's not outside of the realms of possibility.
exactly.
Um, and luckily it was caught. It was flagged to the FIA and the powers that be. He was interviewed. His colleagues were interviewed, and ultimately he was removed from his post, and he will not steward again in Saudi Arabia or for any FIA sanctioned event. And he has since issued an apology for what he has said. But
Hmm.
what a bloody weird thing to do.
It was very peculiar. I mean, you know, I love the marshals. They give up their own time to do this. You know, it is a volunteer role,
Yes.
and they are incredible people. And a lot of the marshals you see around the F1 circuit across the year are British marshals that, because you know, we have a very high standard for our marshals here in the UK,
We do.
and you know, Silverstone train them incredibly well. But it was bizarre. His status was about Hamilton primarily, hoping that he has the same accident as Grosjean had in Bahrain, and other such things that he, if that happens in front of him, he's not going to be the one going to help him. It stinks. It's awful. And like I said, you are potentially the marshal first on scene there to pull him out. That could be the decision between whether that person lives or whether that person dies. And this isn't just pussyfooty, we're not just he's got a graze or a cut. It is, it could be life or death. And from the accidents we've seen at this circuit, there is real potential for that to have happened. Horrible, horrible incident. I'm glad they caught him. I'm glad that they've barred him now from all further participation. You're meant to do this because you love it, and you just give the boys and girls around you a really bad fucking name. And I've already seen on the Twitter sphere, because we know how toxic Twitter can be. I've already seen hate sent towards a number of marshalling group Twitter accounts, and it's like they're not all the same. They're not all the same.
Don't tar them all with the same brush.
If you want to be angry at someone, be angry at him. Go and find him. His account is, I'm not even going to mention the name of it, but
you can find it.
You can find it. It's there's a thing called Google. If you want to direct hatred about it, then he's the one responsible for it, not everyone else. And
it's not the sort of PR marshals need. We took some time out in one of our podcasts last year to convey our condolences to the family of a marshal who very sadly lost his life at Brands Hatch. These guys, lots of people think it's just a jolly. I'm just getting a front row seat, and all I have to do is put on some orange overalls. No, there is risk involved in this. You are expected to be the first one on scene. You're expected to know how to operate a fire extinguisher and know where all the triggers are on a vehicle to make sure it's safe and the battery's disconnected and what have you. And things can go wrong. We have seen entire marshal posts be knocked down in the past. And I mean, we're only talking about 12 months ago this marshal died. It's a risky job. They don't need the bad press or the bad PR because it's a hard enough job as it is.
Exactly. And it doesn't pay. So
no, it's all volunteer.
It's all volunteer work. So, I can't fault them. I think they're amazing people. But just certain people, again, letting these people down. And it's appalling. I'm glad it was caught, though. Really glad that it was caught. Obviously, the other thing I wanted to talk about as well is the hatred being directed to a female journalist that was just doing her usual tweets through the weekend about F1. And it was just a casual tweet. Obviously, we know Seb Vettel wasn't out there, okay? And it ties in with the Mick Schumacher stuff, okay? So, as it turns out, Mick had an accident and all that kind of jazz. Hamilton actually went down to the garage to make sure he was all right. He went down to the Haas garage, tried to find out if he was all right. She put up a tweet of a screen cap of Hamilton coming out the Haas garage, and all she did was Hamilton filling in for the Seb father duties. It's a vibe, a nice post. I felt.
Yeah.
Oh my God. People have been sending her death threats, saying that it's got nothing to do with Seb. You need to, and going on about what the hell has this got to do with Sebastian Vettel, and saying that Hamilton is the replacement for Vettel as the father of the paddock is a joke, and it just spiraled out of control to the point where people were all getting on her case, trying to make her quit her very job, which is being a fucking journalist online. That is her job. Now, if you were one of those people listening to this podcast, don't do that. Don't do that shit. I have one word in particular that I would like to refer to you as, and I don't want to say it on the podcast because I think it'll bring the tone down. Not that I don't do that already.
Hey, we both do that.
But it's a very cutting word, and it begins with C and ends in T. That is what you are, and I don't condone any of it. Not least of all because she had literally just announced not long before that, following obviously the big emphasis this year with Total Wolf coming out about mental health and everything. She came out about her own struggles as being a female journalist in a male-dominated industry. because she is a motorsports journalist that specialises in Formula E. I'm going to give her a shout out. Hazel Southwell, I believe her name is.
Okay.
Really, like her tweets.
I'll go look.
Her tweets were nothing. I don't get where people get off on it, to be honest. It just exploded. And it was actually Engine Mode 11, a friend of ours, Daniel Drury, that drew my attention to it because he tweeted about he wasn't going to get involved. However, he did make a statement that people are talking about their mental health and now it's being used back against them as a weapon. People were using her mental health back against her with the whole, well, just go and kill yourself and all that kind of stuff. This is the problem. This is why people don't come out about their mental health, because you people will use it as a weapon against them to basically intensify the ideas of self-harm and to end their life inside their brain that is already struggling with all these different emotions. It's uncalled for. Frankly, do you know what I would love to see the day is people that do that, where they are, preying on people that are struggling with their mental health and enforcing them to go and kill themselves or do self-harm, should be held to account on the levels of manslaughter, because you're actually influencing their decision at the very least. It's not on. It's not on. It's difficult enough to talk. I mean, I know about my mental health. I've struggled many a time with my mental health, and I've spoken to you, about it. Especially after certain things that happened in the real world.
Yep.
I think it's disgusting, and you're not true fans of the sport.
Everyone out there will, whether they admit it or not, will have suffered with poor mental health at some point, shape, or form. It's just that there is still a stigma attached to it. I'm really hoping we are breaking down that stigma, and I spent the last 4 years of my life working for a mental health NHS trust to try and break down some of those walls and stigmas, and I'm going to continue to do so.
And I've been trying to do the same through my emergency service work. But it's hard.
It is.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I didn't mean to.
No. That's what I was just going to say for reference. That horrible word that Steve won't say, I will. It was clot. You're all clots. But no, you're absolutely right. There is absolutely no place for this in our sport whatsoever. And I'm going to be really brutally honest here. What was the lady's name again? I was just looking at Twitter.
Hazel Southwell. I think it's Hazel Southwell. Yeah.
So I'm going to be brutally honest here. Would I rather listen to Hazel Southwell or Damon Hill give me their breakdown on the sport? I'm going to go with Damon because I know him and I've watched him for years and he's lived it and breathed it. But that doesn't mean to say her opinion is invalid. It doesn't mean to say I certainly wouldn't give her any abuse for it. And actually, there are some fantastic Formula One female Formula One presenters, and I'm terrible with names. I can never remember.
For one.
Who is the lady that does the Sky Sports stuff? She's been.
You've got Natalie Pinkham.
Natalie Pinkham, thank you. Natalie Pinkham's been on the grid for years. And of course, way back when, for those of you who are old as me, Davina McCall
was she did the MTV with Simtech, didn't she, in the mid-90s?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. So, there's been some fantastic female presenters out there, and we're starting to see greater female representation in lots of sports. Football's the same.
Yes. Their positions aren't less valuable just because they're female. Because the new pundit, Naomi Sheaf, I don't know if you've seen much of her.
The South African lady.
That's the one. Yes.
Yes, she's been racing in South African Formula for a while, hasn't she?
Yes, she has. Tin tops and everything else. Now, she is a handy racer behind a tin top wheel. And she didn't have the best of seasons in her season in W Series. It was a vastly different car to what she's been driving previously. To be expected. But she knows what she's talking about when it comes to racetrack stuff, and I find that she is a great presenter now on the new Monday series, Any Driven Monday on Sky Sports. Really fun. Not so convinced by the just normal TV presenter they've drafted in to co-present with her. I find that he's a bit clueless with anything motorsports.
Wow. There's a few F1 male presenters that I'm not particularly interested in, frankly. But that's true of a lot of things. And I can hear my dad, because my dad hates commentary. My dad is the person who records Match of the Day every Saturday, watches the highlights, and then fast forwards to the next game, so he doesn't have to listen to Gary Lineker talk.
I know it's going off on a bit of a tangent, this whole conversation right now, but it's one that we need to have, because every year we seem to be finding there's things about mental health that just fans, toxic people are just so unaccepting of. But I was going to say the presenter that I actually miss the most for F1 was Jim Rosenthal. I loved Jim
Oh,
Rosenthal. Such a
on
unique,
ITV.
yes, such a distinctive voice. When his voice come on,
Mm.
I knew that it was race time. It was like, yes, I'm Jim Rosenthal, and this is the Australian Grand Prix.
You want to go down that route? I'll say who I missed this weekend was Martin Brundle because he wasn't there this weekend, was he?
Yes, yes. So obviously in his contract, he can miss up to 6 races a year.
Yeah, so it was
Interesting that he
Jenson Button and
chose.
Anthony Davidson
Ah,
stepping in.
yes, and there's another bit of Twitter that I want to pick up on as well.
Oh,
Oh
here we
God,
go.
there was a lot of hate towards Jenson Button I saw on Twitter this weekend.
For what?
Um, basically saying that he hasn't praised Hamilton once for the overtakes that he's been doing on track. Because interestingly, see what I find absolutely funny with this toxic fan base. So it all seems to stem around Hamilton. This is where it all comes from, because he is a very divisive personality on the F1 grid. You either like him or you hate him. It's Marmite. What
It is.
you're looking at something. What are you doing?
I am.
So yes, you see, and I also have that as well.
Jensen has openly said in his book and in the public domain that Lewis will go down as one of the greatest of all time,
Yes,
and was one of the most challenging teammates that he ever raced up against. He doesn't need to say, in the same respect that he doesn't need to say what a fabulous blue
it doesn't
the
need
new
to.
Williams car is,
Yeah,
but just because it isn't said doesn't mean it's not something he's thinking of. And
yeah,
actually, we're skipping well ahead here. Lewis had a shocking race.
he
It
did.
was really poor by his own standards and potentially by the standards of that car, and he'll be the first to admit that. And he apologised to his own team for his performance this weekend. Why would Jensen be waxing lyrical about how great Lewis is?
Yeah,
I'm a big Lewis fan. I've
yeah.
known him for decades, but
Mm.
I'm not going to say he had a great race because
He
he
didn't.
didn't.
No, he
And
didn't.
he knows
He
that.
didn't.
But it doesn't, this one bad
Mm.
race doesn't mar his career. He's still going to go down statistically as one of the greatest of all time.
Of course he will.
Jensen doesn't need to say that. We don't need to be kissing his ass every time.
No.
In the same way, we shouldn't be kissing Max's ass and
Yeah.
Leclerc's ass every time something good happens. You call it as you see it.
Yeah. And what I find fascinating, well, like what I was saying is what I find fascinating with this sort of toxic demographic that we are now presented with
Mm.
is that last year, Sky, and for many years were persistently accused of being Hamilton biased. And,
Yeah.
For glorifying Hamilton and for never shutting up about how great Hamilton is. And what I find that the toxic fan base have now somehow turned is that they're now saying that this year, oh, Sky just love to hate on Lewis. They just love to rubbish him and all that kind of. It's like, what world are you living in, and what broadcast are you watching? Jensen doesn't need to talk about Hamilton having a shocker of a race and doing nothing all race long. Like, most of the cars he overtook were literally by staying out long term on the hard tyres because he hadn't pitted. He didn't pit under the safety car because he started on the hards. He was running long, and actually the safety car fucking screwed him and K-Mag over a fair bit.
He was the last, Lewis was the last one to pit.
Yeah, exactly. And when he finished race, on that, when it all worked itself out, he finished 10th and scored a point. And Hamilton obviously said on the radio, "Is there even a point for 10th place?" It's like, yeah, you're gonna get one, mate. You're gonna get
Yeah.
one.
You're not getting the fastest lap
But
there either.
I
Sorry,
don't
mate.
know. I don't know where they get off on it all. But it
Yeah.
is what it is. Unfortunately, there's
It's,
plenty more action elsewhere going on that we were focusing on.
and this I think is the problem is fans come in very different flavors.
They do.
Yeah. I am a self-confessed Lewis Hamilton fan because I know him or knew him when I was younger. I grew up with him. We were from a local area together, and I've watched him go through the factors. When Max Verstappen first came through, I thought he was a breath of fresh air, and I really liked him. He was dicey, this, that, and the other. I have been turned off by Max more as things have gone on, and I now am less of a fan of Max. What that didn't stop is when we did the Bahrain review last week, I gave Max plenty of plaudits for the
Yeah.
work he was doing. Spoiler alert, he's going to get plenty this week as well. And
Yes.
Lewis ain't going to get any,
No.
hardly any.
No.
So, but there are other fans out there that are neutral. Football was always the worst for this. If you're a Manchester
Yes.
United fan,
Oh.
Manchester City can do nothing right.
Yep.
Because they're a local team, they're a local derby. I'm a Newcastle United fan because I'm a Geordie. Therefore, Sunderland can do nothing right, and nothing will ever change my mind on that.
Yeah.
Arsenal and Tottenham, those fierce rivalries go on. But those really loyal fans struggle to look past their blinker view at anything beyond their own team. We're seeing that a lot with F1. People are drawing real allegiances to their own teams, and everyone else can go and whistle as far as they're concerned. And actually, I like to take a much more measured view of the entire grid as a whole.
Yeah, and I'm the same. I don't like all this thing. Once upon a time, and I actually said this to Hazel on Twitter. I sent her a tweet in response to everything going on. I said there was once a time where everyone had a mutual respect for the other drivers on the grid, and it wasn't toxic. Unfortunately, now it is, and for me personally, there's been a marked turn in the level of toxic fans from the moment they started doing Netflix's Drive to fucking Survive.
Well, the other thing is one of these.
Yeah, everyone's now got a voice. Everyone's now got a voice, but I've seen it get worse since this younger generation, based on Netflix, have been introduced. And I'm all for new fans being introduced, but there has to be an acceptable level set.
So the problem is simple for me. There are and social media and that generation is partly to blame for this. There are no repercussions.
No.
If you are a massive Max Verstappen fan and you hate Lewis Hamilton and you walk up to Lewis Hamilton because you get the opportunity and you tell him exactly what you think of him, I mean, well, not these days, but 30 years ago, you would have got lumped and his security would have bumped you off out the back somewhere and they would have found you unconscious a few hours later. These days, you can tell him exactly what you think of him from your keyboard, sat on your sofa 200 miles away, under a false name or alias, and no one knows who the hell you are. No one cares who you are, really.
No.
But there's no repercussions for that. And as you were saying earlier around mental health, those people who are writing, I know you suffer with mental health, you should kill yourself, end it all, it'll be the right thing to do. Those people will get their comeuppance. We're already starting to see racist behavior is no longer tolerated on social media. The police will track your IP address, they will find you, and they will arrest you for breach of the peace or incitement or whatever it might be, racial aggravation, assault. And rightly so. Rightly so. The day will come when actually telling someone that they should kill themselves will start to become a crime in a similar sort of way. And I can hear the arguments now. I'm hearing people say, when did sticks and stones may break my bones stop becoming appropriate? And I get that. I get that. If someone wants to call me fat, grey, overweight, boring, fine, fill your boot. It's water off a duck's back. I couldn't care less. If someone comes up and tells me that I should kill myself and my family be better off without me, that feels like a whole nother line. That feels like a step further. And actually, me as an individual, I'd be affected like that. Lewis Hamilton, who's getting 2 million tweets a week, and maybe 500,000 of them are negative, and 100,000 of them are telling him to go and kill himself. Who wants that? Would you want that? Would you want people bombarding your inbox with that sort of stuff?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. It's something that I don't want.
We need to do better. As the human race,
we need to do better.
We need to do better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There needs to be more emphasis on this. We are racing as one. And it needs to be used in the right way.
God, this F1 podcast goes very different ways, doesn't it?
It does. It swings and yings and yangs. Obviously,
next week, how to wire a plug.
Yeah. Obviously, going back to the race. Let's go back to the racing.
Let's do that.
Another thing with this Saudi Arabia track that has caused a little bit of controversy, obviously, that has played a role in the actual race result, that DRS activation point.
Similar to Bahrain, though. 2 DRS zones back to back with each other.
Yes, but it's it's more the antics it induces in the drivers by slamming on the anchors to, and Leclerc outplayed Verstappen on that game. I feel Leclerc won that. Very, very clever. Very good.
I mean, because I missed so much of the race trying to watch it on a phone whilst making pleasantries with other people. I don't know if Leclerc would have been in a much stronger position had that safety car not have been there. But actually, that was the bigger risk for me because Max is obnoxious on a safety car restart.
Yeah.
I will absolutely say that. I think at some point the FIA should step in because he's taking it too far. But Charles, cool as a cucumber, was like, you can be as obnoxious as you want. You know, pee alongside me, not a problem. I'm just going to use all the track on the outside over here before I then go and down the straights.
Yeah.
And fair play to him, because one of the downsides to any of these safety cars, Azerbaijan was the one that we really used to struggle with. And obviously Monza has its own problems with this. When you have a safety car restart and you are bunched up and everyone's sniffing each other's gearboxes, and you've got a long straight and the opportunity for a slipstream, being in first is almost a disadvantage.
Yeah.
If you were doing it in an online sim racing lobby, you'd probably drop down to second as quickly as possible to try and get the slipstream back to get past your buddy. Charles played a blinder, not only with the safety car restarts, but with the vast majority of those DRS issues. And, you know, it was similar madness to what we saw last year with Lewis, which is why Lewis ended up coming into contact with Verstappen because of his antics.
Yeah.
Also, do you think Checo was a little bit naughty on the safety car restart?
Oh, wasn't he just? Yeah.
So, for reference, for anyone who didn't watch it, Checo, obviously, who fell foul of this safety car issue, and terrible for him. Carlos Sainz was run off the track by Checo, and if you look at it on the face of it, it looks like Checo's in front because he is by the time Carlos joins the track. But the safety car line is further back, and Sainz was well ahead. So that was an obvious. Checo, you need to let Carlos go.
Yeah, and I didn't like how Checo forced him towards the wall as well. That was a bad taste.
Under safety car conditions as well, completely unnecessary.
Yep.
But the team, I can't remember what the team's wording was, but the giving of the position back was done after the safety car.
After the safety car, yeah. They instructed him. They said to him, Checo, we will have to give the place back, but not right now. We'll do it once the race gets underway again.
Yeah, and that's a very strategic move because it means Carlos is not in a place to challenge Max, which means Max doesn't have to go to defensive and compromise his lines and gives him full attack towards Charles Leclerc. But it also hampers Carlos's chance of getting any further points as well. Yeah. But Checo won't get a penalty for it. The team won't be penalised for it because the place was given back within a racing lap, which is the general rule of thumb. So it was it was canny from Red Bull, and I probably would have done something similar tactically if I was there, but it feels wrong. It doesn't feel within the sporting regulations somehow. No. I don't like it.
No, I wasn't a fan. Didn't like it at all. But yeah, I think Leclerc, like you say, he did the best he could to try and fend off Verstappen there. Obviously, eventually we know that Verstappen got the upper hand and got past, but it was close across the line because obviously Leclerc had the comeback with the DRS as well. But yeah, he just
would he have been closer had it not been for the yellow flag the lap before? Because there was a yellow flag. I can't remember what it was for. Was it Stroll and Albon coming together? I can't remember. But there was a yellow flag on the pit straight. In fact, it was a double-waved yellow flag because lots of drivers called the stewards after for not slowing enough.
That was it.
But that meant the DRS couldn't be opened. So Charles missed his one-lap opportunity to get back at Max. Had that not have happened, it would have been an even more dicey finish.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, we saw in sort of the space of a couple of laps, so a load of cars dropped out. Bottas retired with some issues. Alonso, Ricciardo.
Yeah.
Now, that was the controversial thing. Do you think that with marshals on the track pushing cars out the way, that should have been, in my opinion, probably should have been an instant. Bearing in mind it's pit entry, should have been pit lane closed. Let them get the cars out the way. They left it open for quite some time there. I mean, thankful for Magnussen and Haas because they wanted to get off those hards and onto the mediums to comply with the 2 tyres per race ruling, as did Hamilton and the like. But of course, the conspiracy theories. Oh, he missed it, didn't he? Who was the other one?
It was Hockenheim-esque. It was in. Well, I've just passed it.
Oh, it was all down that. How did they mess that up? That was shocking.
Not the first time. Not
No,
the first
not
time.
the first time. And he was literally, man, I've already gone past the pits. It's like you've just scuppered him, really scuppered him there. I mean,
Safety car rules need to be established a bit more
yeah, they
clearer because
do.
you made a good point. If there's a marshal on the track, should a safety car be deployed?
On a straight track like that,
You'd argue yes.
yeah, I said straight away. I said to the I'd said on the watch along. I said straight away. This is surely with two cars now stopped
Mm,
in the pit entrance. You've got two groups of marshals on the track trying to push these bloody cars out the way,
mm,
and the only way they can push them is into the pit entrance. It should be a bloody safety car to allow the marshals safe enough time to get on the track, get these cars out of the way. I found
mm.
it a bit bizarre, and that was a decision I didn't agree with the race director on this occasion. I felt that should have been, for all the furore for safety, that should have been a safety car.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I'd agree with you. I think it should have been. Like
um,
you say, two cars stopped on track,
mm,
human beings out there shoving them out the way.
yeah,
You know, we've seen before what happened, in the rain at Suzuka to Jules Bianchi
yeah,
when a safety car is not deployed and there are people on the track doing things.
mm, it's
No
not good.
one wants a repeat of that.
No, I don't want to see any of that, and I don't want to see the marshals come into harm or anything, because ultimately it'll be them that's going to get a chop with a front wing across their ankles and God knows what else. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I fancy being hit by a carbon fiber sharp pointy wing at
God, no,
150 miles an hour.
no, exactly. So yeah, no, that just was a bit of a obscure choice. Of
Mm,
course, only 13 cars were running at the checkered flag. I think that's the
yeah.
fewest we've had for quite some time, actually, to be honest. I can't remember the last time we had that many retirements.
It's probably not that long ago, but it feels longer ago. The turbo hybrid era has
Mm,
been oddly more reliable than even I'd expected.
yeah,
Um,
because I kind of
but
expected
yeah,
issues with turbos and God knows what else, all the hybrid elements, but no, they've actually been largely pretty solid. But yeah, so Verstappen takes the win. Obviously,
hmm
Leclerc second. Sainz, Mr. Consistent, P3
yeah,
again. So it's 4 out of 4 podiums for Ferrari.
mm, yeah, it is.
That's not a bad track record to be having. I was
So,
quietly impressed by George, actually, to be honest. When I saw that he come out in
yeah.
fifth, I was like, he's not been on the TV at all in this race. Like, I've not seen him once. He's
Mm.
just plugged along and got himself a nice little rewarding point. Puts him ahead of
There were
Lewis in the
plenty of
championship.
memes about it after the race.
Mm.
I always forget what the meme would be called, but that one guy that sort of stands there in the middle of nowhere looking out to space.
Yeah,
It's sort of like George Russell or race. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. He
yeah,
was he was on his own. He ran a decent race. He was
yeah.
best of the rest,
He
which is
was
about
best
as
of the
good as we
rest.
can expect from the Merc this year.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I think that naturally brings us into driver rankings,
Yeah, let's do it.
where we can give some opinions on said drivers.
Opinions? When have you ever known us to have
God,
opinions?
I've never been opinionated in my life. um, Obviously, if there is talking points that we've missed from the race, let us know because we're always open to discussing them at any point. I kind of feel like we've talked more about the toxic fan base element than we have the actual racing, but there wasn't much besides the last 10 laps that actually happened in the race. So,
There wasn't. It was a
no.
very dull affair, other than the incidents and
Yeah.
then the last few laps.
Yeah. And that's how you can describe it, incidents and then the end.
Mm. Yep.
We'll dive into the racing. Let's dive into the racing. Let's dive into the driver ratings. So Max Verstappen, the race winner. We'll go through them race order again. I'm sure you've got the race finishing order in front of you, have you?
I
Because
do indeed.
I don't.
I've got it. Don't you worry.
Excellent. So yeah, Max, where's he ranking for you today?
So, I, I'm yin and yanging a little bit here, and the reason I'm doing so is because last week when we ranked them, we talked about God tier being the
Yes.
top tier, and actually, I don't think anyone deserves God tier this weekend. I don't think there was any outstanding performance from anyone, but there was lots of very good performances. So is our scale, is it God tier, very good, good, average, or is it God
Yeah,
tier,
so
good, average.
you got God tier, very good, good,
Okay.
average, and I've now corrected the bottom part, so you got poor, very poor, and the Mazepin of the Day awards. I've already got a
Perfect. Love
contender
it.
for Mazepin of the Day, so
So in which case I will give Max and I'll give Charles. We'll go straight in for very goods. They were the two best drivers of the day. They had a great race. They had a great battle. They were very fair with each other in that
mm,
battle, or as much as they could be, whilst running
yeah,
each other off as much as they could. Neither of them warranted God tier because the performance just wasn't good enough,
no,
or wasn't
and you
flawlessly
could.
perfect. But they both ran a good race.
Yeah, and you could say though that they were pretty lucky with the safety car working out the way it did
Hmm.
for them both. So yeah, I agree. There was nothing that really sort of made me go, "Oh my god, wow, that was like," it wasn't like as if one of them zoomed up the road by, a whole minute and a half over the next one,
Mm.
constantly pumping in lap records. It wasn't like that. So yeah, very good. I would agree. I would agree. Um,
Right. So that covers Max and Charles.
so Sainz and Perez.
So controversial.
Cool.
Science gets good
Good. Okay.
for being solid, consistent, do a decent job, but not performing quite as well as Charles all weekend.
Yeah. Agreed. Yep.
Checo gets a very good from me because he got his first pole. He ran a flawless race. We know how Checo is with his tyres. I'm willing to bet when Ferrari were pitting, he had probably 20 laps worth of life left in those
So, yeah, he
tyres.
probably did.
He fell foul of a knee-jerk call, which was the right thing from the team. I would have done the same, and then a poorly timed safety car for him. And I feel for him because
Yes.
that's unfair, but
Yeah.
that's racing.
It's racing. Yeah, it is racing. Yeah,
Mm,
I think overall Checo was doing a very handy job until that safety car and the pit
yeah,
stop that, ah, just wrong timing, wrong place, wrong time. So
it was.
nothing he can really do about that. And of course, Mr. Consistent Science, yeah, it's another good race for him. But, brings it home, some solid points.
Mm.
So P5 is going to be Georgie Boy. Uh, what do you
I
say?
hover between good and very good. You can help me decide on this one. I think George has brought that car home best of the rest, probably as good as it could be. The fact that he was never on the TV is not necessarily a bad
No.
thing. It meant you ran a solid, consistent race, which is what you need. Where would you go? Would you go good or very good?
Do you know, on the basis of he seemed to have the legs on Hamilton all weekend, I
Hmm?
would actually push him more towards a very good performance for the car he's in.
There's your winner
That's
then.
that's where I would be pushing George to go. It's not every day you outpace a seven-time world champion and the record race winner in Formula One history. So,
Absolutely.
we've seen Lewis deal with dogs of a cars, and he's just not dealing with this dog of a car.
No, not yet.
Not
We'll see how
yet.
it
Not
pans out.
yet.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
P6. Who's sixth?
So I'm going to be controversial
It's
here as
Ocon,
well.
wasn't it?
Esteban Ocon was
Yes.
P6.
Yes, he was.
I'm going to give Esteban good, not very good, good. And I balance this because he had a great battle with Fernando Alonso. And that's good because there was some great driving.
Hmm.
And equally, that's really bad and really stupid because he nearly ran his own teammate into the wall. And rule one
Yeah.
is don't take out your teammate. So actually, whilst there was some good battling, some wheel to wheel stuff, there was too much. It was for too much on
Yeah.
Esteban's part. So yeah, I'll give him a good. But
Yeah. I think
he needs to be careful.
he done good. For me, had that battling and everything cost Alonso and him more pace than it actually did, he would have dropped a bit lower, if I'm
Mm.
being completely honest. Because with him defending as hard as he possibly could from his own teammate, it just allowed George to scamper off up the road, and he was just like, "Well,
Absolutely.
you guys crack on then, because I'll just." Was it Magnussen as well? It might have been Magnussen in there because I know Magnussen had a pretty good start, and yeah, it just dropped
Mm.
him off the back of him, and it was just like, you guys should just like someone needs to get on that radio, tell him to fucking calm it down. If Alonso's the faster man at this stage, let him go and have a go. Let him go and have a go, and use the best of his bloody tyres if he wants to. It's Alonso, whatever, and
Yeah.
and then see what happens. But they let them race, and it actually ended up costing them more pace than what they should have lost. Would it have changed the race result in the end? I don't know.
Probably not.
Probably not. But there's always that what if. Would he have been able to get stuck in with George a bit and, all that kind of stuff? It was a bit of a silly decision because at the end of the day, Alpine need all the points they can get in that midfield battle that they're in. They're going to be in all season. So, yeah, a bit of a silly one. But, yeah, I think overall, good is a fair decision because he brought home some solid points again. P7 then. Who have we got?
Lando.
Oh, it is Lando, yes. The safety car, fortunately, we really did favour him in the end. That brought him back into some contention. Quietly got on with it. Nothing spectacular, but I feel it was a good race for Lando.
Yeah, it's sort of where I want to come down as well. If you benchmark it against last year's car, it's poor.
Yeah, it's poor.
If you benchmark it against what we think we know of this year's car's performance based on what happened at Bahrain, it's a pretty good showing. So I'd probably go for a good.
Yeah, I think good. And again, he had the legs on Danny Rick for a large part of it. So, P8. That
Mr. Pierre Gasly.
Gasly, yes, picking up his first points of the year, which is probably where he would have finished in Bahrain, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, it probably is.
Mr. P8 this year.
I'm actually going to be a little bit harsh on Pierre, and I'm only going to give him an average because I think P8 is about roughly where that car should be. But if you look at the cars in front of him, Lando, Ocon, I think Gasly should have been higher up.
Yeah, he probably should have been. Sonoda had looked. I don't know. I don't really know how to compare him against Gasly because he's so in bloody consistent. But
yeah, he is.
Yeah, Gasly for me last year was a standout performer. I felt he did an exceptional job. Actually, last 2 years in the AlphaTauri, I think he's done a great job. Just doesn't seem to quite be there with it yet.
He's getting there. He's getting there. It's difficult to give him too much stick for that because we can't give him a benchmark for his race last time out at Bahrain.
No. Yeah.
But I would argue, and I know I'm not a big fan of Esteban Ocon, and never have been, but I think Gasly's a better driver than Ocon.
Yeah.
And I think the machinery he has underneath him, I think he should have been ahead of Ocon.
Ahead of him. Yeah. Obviously, P9 was K-Mag.
It was indeed.
I think he lost out through that safety car because he was on an alternate strategy. Interestingly, K-Mag was saying that had it been a full safety car for those last two, he was on obviously fresh mediums to everyone on hards. He was saying there was a real good possibility of some chunky points available there, but still bringing home another couple of points for the Haas team, which they're going to be delighted with. What was it Gunther come out and said? I did see a tweet. I saw something. He was quoted as saying, hang on, I've got it here. Here it is.
I think I only follow the Steiner parody account. So
no, this is great. This is real Gunther here. So he was asked his thoughts on Kevin Magnussen coming home with another points finish for 9th and 2 points. And he said, if you'd asked me that last year, he said, I would have fucked the whole paddock for 2 points.
Oh, God, I love Gunther. Don't ever change, mate. Don't ever change.
I just think it sums him up. He just says it as it is. And you know what? He's probably quite right. He probably would have fucked the whole paddock
probably
for 2
would,
points. Yeah.
He absolutely would have done. Someone would have held his coat and he would have gone for it.
I'm torn with where to place K-Man because he'd done so well, and it was just because the field had all been bunched up again that he's lost out through the pit stops.
I would go for good.
Yeah,
that's where I would put him. He's one position up on his starting grid position because he started P10, made it up to P9. He had a good battle with Lewis and he held off the 7-time former world champion. He did a solid job throughout the weekend, but
yeah, because I mean
that's about where I think that car should be.
Yeah, it probably is. To see him because he had an exceptional start, jumped a couple of positions on the start as well. was actually running P7 or P6 at one point. I thought, bloody hell, like this guy is on it this year. What impresses me more with Magnussen this year, just while we're on the subject of him, is he just seems a much more calmer, mature person than what he did with the before the year out of F1. He's come back, he's got a newborn child, and he just seems so relaxed. He's happy to talk to any of the press people from Sky running up to him, and he just gives a good account of himself.
I think there is something in having a child makes a big difference to you,
Yeah.
because if you remember, Grosjean was the first driver in a really long time that I remember being banned from a race for hitting the number of penalty points for the amount of stupid accidents, all in the first lap as well.
Yeah, they were.
That he caused in the old black and gold Lotus.
Lap one here,
and
right?
it was the season after that he had a baby, and he came back and he was a changed man. He was much more cautious.
Yeah, calmer man behind the wheel, and really seemed to be almost a team leader, which he was for Haas for a while. Yeah, I am impressed with Magnussen this year, and if he carries on, he's going to be my standout performer of the year. If he does continue that trend. So 10th place brings us to Lewis. Not a result befitting of a 7-time world champion. And a weekend, I would say, all at sea. I would actually say it's a very poor performance from Lewis this weekend.
I think you're underselling it. I think I would go one tier further down.
A Mazepin award.
Yeah.
Wow.
By his own standards, as a 7-time world champion, that's a shocking result. Yeah. By the baseline of what the car's possible to achieve as 5th place, it's a shocking result. He's apologising to the team. He's, the indication is the issue is with him as the driver as opposed to the car. The car obviously isn't helping, but Lewis had a shocker.
Yeah, I'll give you it. Yeah, I guess when you look at it, that's actually, I would say, probably one of his worst ever career performances. I can't remember a race where he's been as poor, actually, to be honest.
I mean, the only other thing that comes to mind is him ditching it in the gravel in
China,
07 at China when he should have won the championship. But that was a one-off mistake in a race rather than a poor performance over a whole weekend. I agree. I can't remember the last time he was this poor.
And the team had left him out on tyres that were showing the cord.
Yeah.
So but I'm not making excuses for him. Yeah, do you know what? Mazepin a day. So I'm going to ask you a question now then.
7.
Well, actually 7 could well be the actual end result.
Okay.
Because I made a bold prediction last year on the podcast. I made a note of it. I made a bold prediction last year.
Oh God, here we go.
And you said I was being a bit ambitious.
What was your prediction?
My prediction was that if Lewis Hamilton didn't win the 2021 Drivers' World Championship, he would never win a world title again.
Okay.
Yeah. My question is, where am I now? Am I closer to the money? I made it was a bold prediction, but I don't think he'll ever win a world championship again. I think he's done for world championships. I think what we're seeing this year is the real change in the guard now. Because the other question
I'm going to sit on the fence.
Oh, you just sit on the fence.
My suspicion was I thought things were going to go in various different ways for Lewis. I thought he could have retired after last year. Yeah. I would have, from a sporting perspective, I might no longer want to do a big competing. I might have thought that was enough. There is one major team on the grid that Lewis hasn't represented that I think he really wants to before he retires.
Ferrari. Yeah.
So he had 2 heroes growing up, Ayrton Senna, as everyone our age did,
of course,
and Michael Schumacher, because he won everything there was to win. But Schumacher did it all in a Ferrari. I think Lewis secretly wants to be in a Ferrari. Ferrari have made it clear on a couple of occasions that they would like to have him in the car. They've had their Alonsos and their Vettels.
Yeah.
Charles might end up winning a title for them this year, but had that not have happened, Lewis might have been their next best chance at winning a title. I actually don't think he would have done. I think he would have had 2 years at a good go and probably not won in the same way as Alonso and Vettel went to Ferrari and couldn't make it work. But
Well, same as
that was
Mansell went to Ferrari, couldn't make it work. There's a pattern there.
Jean Alesi went
John
to Ferrari
Alesi,
and couldn't make it
yeah,
work.
Gerhard Berger, yeah, oh god, those were the days. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm backing my bold prediction. I don't think he's going to win another world championship. I think he's done. I think he'll win some races. I don't think he's going to win a championship. It's bold.
I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence.
It's bold, but I'm sticking with it. I'm sticking with it. Right, P11 then. Who was P11?
Zhao Guanyu.
Oh, Mr. Joe. Yeah, so he got himself a few penalties, didn't he? In the race. So
yeah, he had two pit stops as well.
Yes, he did. So they kind of, yeah, the team made a fuck up. So he got given a 5-second time penalty for track limits, leaving the track and gaining an advantage. I think he cut across turn 2, basically. That's what they got, the crux of the matter. Obviously, that means that when he makes his pit stop, they're not allowed to touch the car for 5 seconds. In the kerfuffle of this, he's come in for his pit stop, pulled into pit box. The tyre guys have waited. The front jack man didn't quite wait, and he had already stuck his jack in, couldn't get it to function, swapped out with the second jack man. Obviously, they've touched the car. He then gets a subsequent drive-through penalty for not serving the previous 5-second penalty. So he kind of got a double whammy, because even though he was still stationary in the pits for an extended period of time, where the tyre guys didn't touch the car, because the jackman had touched the car, it counted as the penalty not being served because he touched the car within the 5 seconds that he wasn't meant to have chucked the jack in. So not only has he had a delayed stop and a jack issue on the front of the car anyway, he's then had to come back round and serve a drive-through fucking penalty. I kind of was just like, that is so harsh and cruel, but F1 is a cruel mistress.
It's the rules.
It's the rules.
Rules are the rules.
It's the rules. The team were desperate to get the pit stop done, but you have to wait 5 seconds, boys. You can't just, you can't just cast that to the side and worry about it later. That's not how it works. And this race director isn't afraid to dish out penalties, it seems. He's quite happy to, with the stewards. Of course, the steward, I must say, drove for a favoured team of yours back in the day. Did you hear who the steward was?
Was it Bertrand Gachot?
No.
It
was a Brazilian driver.
Oh, I do. Enrique Benaldi?
Yes, that's the one. Yes.
I knew I'd heard the name.
He was the driver's steward, and he was quite happily dishing out the penalties. He's made a name for himself as a steward this weekend. So,
he did.
Which
is interesting because he didn't make a name for himself as a driver. Well, but that's a different story.
That's not true. He did by holding up Coulthard.
There we go.
At Monaco. There you go. So how do you rate him? I mean, he was off of Bottas substantially this weekend.
He was.
Obviously, that's not to knock him. He is brand new to F1, and Bottas is a seasoned veteran. But
so I would have been going for average on the basis that I thought it was a fairly anonymous midfield performance. But I'll be led by you if you think I'm being too harsh on
him. Well, I mean, he. After the penalty, he made his way back past the 2 Aston Martins and everyone else and sort of clawed his way back towards a point, which he was in the points until bloody Hamilton passed him. So, I think it was average, though. I don't think he displayed the pace that he showed against Bottas back in Bahrain. I don't think he was quite on the same level. Some rookie errors in there this weekend as well with, the track extending and getting himself a penalty. Because, rule of thumb, if you're going to cut a corner, just you got to show on the data that you've backed off after you've shot across the corner. And it's a simple thing to do. Just lift off the throttle. Just show it substantially on the data. So, yeah. I mean, half of it was the team's fault, but he started that whole incident by getting the penalty in the first place.
Yeah.
So, average and a learning curve for him. A learning curve for him. P12, was that Nico?
It was. So P12 was Nico and P13
Yeah.
was Lance. So the next two are really easy. Nico gets a good because he's still doing well in a car that he's barely driven.
Yep.
And Lance gets a poor because it was another shocking performance from a driver that shouldn't be in that car.
Gets a paw, yeah, Paul. Is that
Yeah.
Paul? Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I have to agree. Although in qualifying Hulkenberg was off of Stroll, Stroll had a shocker of a race. He
Yeah.
was all at sea. He was clumsy in wheel-to-wheel battles, apart from the battle with Hamilton. But the contact with Albon was needless. He just didn't even take into account. Oh, the Williams might still be alongside me here going into turn one. He's three-quarters of the way up the inside of you. You got to leave the space. You can't just turn in. As he's caused the team, a bit of damage there to a floor, because it's going to be the floor because it sticks out further than the sideboards. And we know how touchy feely the floors are on the cars, even if it is a bad one. You don't need to make a bad car worse and cause your team headaches.
No, of course you don't. Absolutely.
And Hulkenberg on worn tyres was battling well inside the top 10 after the safety car. So yeah.
It was another decent performance from Nico. He was quicker than Lance, fastest lap in the race by 0.8 of a second.
Yeah.
He was only a couple of tenths behind in qualifying as well. He's plugging along quite nicely is the Hulk.
Yeah, for no seat time, well done. Yeah, another well done. Are we into the retirements now?
We got one more runner, sort of. Alex Albon was still classified because he was only 3 laps down.
Yeah. I don't want to place fault on Albon for the mistake that led to his retirement. He's having a fair battle. It's justified battle for position with the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. Obviously he's not in contention for points.
Yeah.
But he's there. He's 3/4 of the way alongside Lance Stroll, and Stroll just turns across him and destroys the front right corner of the Williams.
Yeah. So I was opting for poor.
Yeah,
because I don't think it's great.
But I don't think it's great. I don't think he's anywhere near great. I didn't see much of him, to be honest, all weekend. He was out in Q1. Was he out in Q1?
Let's have a look. I think he was.
I think he was. I've got a feeling he was out in
Q1.
Yeah,
he was out in Q1 and he was slower than Lewis.
Yeah, so
yeah, it wasn't
great. He's not near the rivals around that Williams car that he needs to be pushing in. I am actually going to say as poor.
Give him time. He will come good. Particularly, he's always going to look good with Latifi as a teammate. But we'll see how that pans out for the rest of the season.
I hope for his sake. Because this is his second chance. This is his
there won't be a third.
Not in the F1 world. There's rarely a third chance. The only driver I know who's had 3 chances and failed every one was Kvyat. But
Yeah, he must have been bringing a lot of oil money to the paddock to warrant 3 chances like that. But yeah.
So, okay, first of the non-finishers.
So this is where we get to the tricky ones. And again, because I missed so much of the race, my gut tells me Bottas ran a good race.
He was running a good race.
Until the retirement. He got into Q3 again. So I'd be opting for a good.
Yep.
Alonso, I thought, was okay. Again, he had a decent battle with Ocon and looked like he'd won out until his engine won. So I'd be looking for a good there.
Yeah.
Danny Rick, I'm thinking more average because I don't think he was quite on Lando's pace and he didn't look like he was going to be either.
No, and you're quite right with that. Danny Rick wasn't really fully with it. And when the chances did come up to profit, Danny Rick wasn't really there to take advantage of them, so to speak. Where they absolutely nailed it with Lando. Through the whole kerfuffle going on and got him into a really good position. Bottas he was running a decent race. He was going to bring home some solid points again this weekend, but some sort of car issue. I don't really know what the issue was in the end, but I would say Bottas had a good race up until then.
I haven't heard any reasons for the DNFs either yet, but we'll see.
No, the other one was Alonso, wasn't it? And again, he was running in the points as well until his car issues.
Then we get to the fun ones. Because after that, we've got Latifi, Tsunoda, and Schumacher. So Latifi is going to be my second Mazepin award because there wasn't a barrier that he wasn't in, frankly. He was well off the pace throughout the entire weekend. He looked like he should have been out there driving an F2 car, not a Formula One car.
Which ultimately is where he should be.
Yeah.
I've seen enough in the first 2 races this year now, of his third year now, that this is it.
Yeah, there's nothing there. There's not enough to warrant it.
He's not coped with the regulation change at all, and it's not going to get any better.
And, as he is a Williams driver, we know that there are some very good drivers in the Williams Academy that would warrant that drive.
Yeah, there is some handy racers in that academy now. Okay, so we had Tsunoda as well. Obviously, he didn't even get to start the race. But where was he in qualifying? I don't recall.
He didn't qualify. They couldn't get the car working for qualifying either.
Couldn't get it working for the race.
The issue was caused pre-qualifying, and they couldn't get it out for quali. Then they got it out on the warm-up lap, and it broke down on the way to the grid.
Whatever that issue is, ouch.
Practice-wise, he was 10th in practice 1. He was 10th in practice 2, and he was, where the hell is he? 6th in practice. Oh, sorry, 6th in practice 1, 10th in practice 2 and 3.
So in practice, he had something about him, but
I would just give it an average on the basis he didn't really turn a wheel in anger. I couldn't find any reason to give him a negative score, but I certainly can't find any reason for a positive score either.
Sure. Okay, we'll go neutral then. And, well, poor old Mick, who was actually P9 in qualifying until he went out.
So, there's 2 options here. It could just be the same as we went for Tsunoda. It could be completely average, no positives, no negatives, just keep it easy. Or the other side of me is give him God tier for the weekend because he managed to escape a shocking accident with barely a scratch on him. And that says that there is something of a deity in him.
Wow. Yeah. I don't really know what to say to that.
I'll leave the decision in your hands.
We'll leave it. Yeah, great. I mean, I was actually going to be quite harsh.
Oh,
I was going to be harsh.
Go on then.
Yeah,
how harsh are you going to be?
I was going to give him a paw for overdriving the car to match Magnussen in qualifying.
Ooh, look at him.
And in overdriving the car has then caused an accident that didn't need to happen. Controversial.
I think you're being too harsh on him.
Yeah, I probably am. But...
part of me, when it comes to Formula One, I expect to see accidents. I always want people to walk away from them okay, but I expect to see them because if we don't see accidents, the drivers are not pushing the car to the limit and they don't know where the limits are. In practice, keep it on the black stuff. When it starts to get a bit slippy, you maybe need to back it off a little bit. In qualifying, you are giving 100%.
Yeah,
you are going for every apex at the maximum amount of speed you can carry. And that is often where you'll find people pushing it that little bit too far and it gets out of hand. And we've seen the best do it. Jensen, Michael, Ayrton, Lewis, Max, they've all, Vettel, they've all blown it in qualifying by pushing that a little bit too hard because they're trying to find the absolute peak of performance. Yes, he might not be performing as well as K-Mag. But, he's now got a proper teammate to learn from.
Yeah,
last year he didn't.
Yeah, last year he didn't. No, last year he looked incredible because Mazepin's so shit.
Exactly.
I'll go put him average. I'm going to put him average.
The problem with Mick is everyone everywhere is always going to compare him to Michael.
And he's not his dad. He's not his dad.
He's not his dad.
That's not the benchmark that you should be comparing him to.
Absolutely. I am not my father. You are not yours. We are both products of our environment and of our combined parents together and everything that's gone along with it. You can't put them in the same category. And if you compare them in the same way, you're setting Mick up for failure. Until Lewis matched and overtook in some of those records, Michael was the greatest of all time on paper in records and in many people's eyes. A lot of people will always say Senna, and I will as well. But a lot of people will recognize Michael as the greatest of all time just from the numbers alone. how do you step up to that?
Yeah, you can't you can't. It's impossible. It's an impossible thing to compare against. I feel because to be honest, it's actually an impossible thing to compare even Hamilton to Schumacher. It's two different eras of car, for a
Yeah.
start.
Mhm.
Different lengths of calendar to achieve the certain milestones and objectives.
Mhm.
It's yeah.
And it's an oddly different skill set. And
Mm,
I'm conscious we're drawing to a close
we
on
are.
what is another feature length podcast that we need to do
Yes,
some shorter ones.
we do.
But here's a really controversial topic. I love Senna. I'm as much of a fan of Senna as anyone. Senna was absolutely superhuman when it came to balancing that car on a fine edge. There's
Mm.
plenty of pictures of him dancing the rear of the
Oh,
car around and
it's beautiful.
finding the grip where no one else can. It's a ballet. It's magical. When that stopped, when the grip stopped becoming an issue because of the control electronics and the hydraulic
Yeah,
suspension and what have you, Senna was still a good driver. He still had his racecraft and his pace and everything, but he lost some of that edge that made him who he was
yeah.
because the playing field had been leveled. Some of his special ability, we now had computers
To
bringing everyone
bring
else up to
everyone
his
else
level.
up. Yeah.
If you'd have put Senna in the same car as Lewis Hamilton, he would have been quick. Would he have been as quick as Lewis?
Well,
Would he
this
have
is
been as
it.
quick as Sebastian Vettel?
Yeah, this is it. Because Lewis has come up with it as a natural. That's just naturally how the car was from the moment he
Yeah.
stepped into it. For Senna, he'd be coming from his natural driving into a car that's suddenly got all these computer gizmos that are going, "Oh no, you can't do that." You know, oh. Yeah,
Different skill sets. But equally, if you look at Formula One drivers now, one of the biggest muscles and the thing they work out the most is their
neck.
neck because of the G
Oh
forces.
yeah, well,
If you go back to Senna's day, let's not forget that was three pedals and an H pattern shifter
oh
and a
yeah.
manual gearbox. If you took Lewis or Vettel or Max back to the late 80s and put them, or even the early 80s, put them in the 1,000 brake horsepower, high
Oh,
turbocharged
oh
boosted cars,
yeah.
and I guarantee you that Senna, Prost, that cohort, Lauda, Keke Rosberg, they'd wipe the floor with them
Mm, yeah,
because it's a
absolutely.
different animal.
Yeah, completely different beast. Different beast to tame. You know, it's yeah.
And
Well,
notice this now. So I was talking about this someone the other day. A modern Golf GTI. I mean, they've been turbocharged for the last 4 or 5 generations, but it's very progressive. The turbocharge, the power, the PSI, it comes in bit by bit by bit as the revs go on, and that means you don't get any turbo lag. It's always there, and it's nice and progressive. I still hark back to the car I've got behind me and those old 90s turbocharged cars where you put your foot down in third gear, watch for the revs, and it's nothing, nothing, nothing. And then you start to hear the turbo spool, but you still got nothing. And then all of a sudden, you push back in the seat as the boost comes on. That's what Formula One cars in the
yes.
80s were like.
Yeah.
It's not what it's like now.
No, it isn't. No. Yeah, it's a different world. A completely different world. Different generation, different breed. In some respects I'm grateful, in others I'm not. But, you know, God, if I could take the best bits of every generation and mingle them into one, that would be fantastic. But it's not possible. You
Oh.
can't. You just can't do it.
You'd
But
end up with an interesting mongrel of a car.
it'd be a Frankenstein of a car, wouldn't it? Yeah, we'll just use those bits and that bit. Yeah, God
We'll
Almighty.
have we'll have the six-wheel Tyrrell chassis with the
Oh
early
yeah,
70s wings.
yeah, and the early '80s turbo 1,000 horsepower beast engine in the back. Let's go
Yep.
racing, boys. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's going to draw us to a close. Um, the driver rankings are there before you all, so please let us know if you disagree or agree. And let us know why. I want to know. I'm always intrigued to get people's opinions on why. And of course, try and be as reasonable as possible as well, with whatever it is. I don't want any sort of extremism going on. But yeah, um, 2 weeks now to Australia. It almost
Mm.
feels like a holiday. Um, I'm not convinced the track upgrades are going to be what we want them to be, or what the Australian organisers are claiming them to be. But we're going to find out.
Only
And
time will tell.
that's the only way we will find out is by going and seeing these cars on the track. It is now higher speed because they've taken up the slower corners. So that's going to help the ground effect through that part of the track. Apps, a bit more airflow. But it is a bumpy track. Well, I say bumpy. They've resurfaced it all, so maybe not. Maybe not.
That's true. They have resurfaced it
They
all,
have.
but that could equally make it
Yeah.
slippy. Brand new
But
tarmac.
they used to abuse the curbs through that flat out chicane. Are they going to be doing that this year with ground effect? Or are we going to see him Timo Glock it on the exit? Well, I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
We will.
Yeah, a pleasure as always, sir, to share the booth with yourself.
And you, my friend.
Yeah, I think that's going to be it from me. So it's a goodbye from me, and I'll see you next time out. Maybe I've got an idea for some little snippet videos I want to put together and upload in the meantime. So you might see me pop up on the channel sporadically. So yeah, John, any final thoughts from you, sir?
Oh, nothing poignant, I'm afraid.
Ah.
But yeah, sort of similar thing. I've got some interesting sort of side ideas and side projects that I think could go on the channel or on our respective personal channels. So we'll see how that content goes. But if not, be good. Based on what we were talking about with social media earlier, be good
Be
to each other.
kind.
Be nice. Be kind.
Yeah, we race as one.
Indeed,
There we
indeed.
go.
And we'll look forward to seeing you again weekend of the 8th of April.
Yeah, weekend 8th for the April. Well, until then, guys, it has been an absolute pleasure. It is goodbye from us here. Take care.
Bye bye.